Ben Reilly, the clone of Spider-Man, has returned, and he vows to be a reckoning for Peter Parker. What'll happen next? Well, let's hop into the pages of Amazing Spider-Man issue number 14, the kickoff to the Dark Web event, and find out what happens next together, shall we? So then, as we join the story proper, we check back on in with Ben and his longtime love interest, Janine, following the defeat of Beyond at the end of the last big Spider-Man run. You may remember that despite after building Ben up as a hero and an equal to Peter for like a whole year's worth of Spider-Man comics, they figured the best way to end that story was for him to not regain any of the important core memories that made him who he was before eventually getting doused with a bunch of science goo that turned him evil. Now he's got an extreme new suit and is going by the codename Chasm. Ben also blames Spider-Man for his lost memories, despite the fact that it wasn't Peter's fault at all. It was the Beyond Corporation who doctored his memories so that they could better control him. Also, despite saving Ben from the wreckage, Janine has decided that she's had enough of Ben's crusade to try and get back at Spider-Man. And because of that, she opts to try and run away from him in New York City, despite the fact that they seemed madly in love at the end of the previous story arc, and the fact that she was basically Ben's entire conscience. Don't worry though, her plan to escape doesn't last very long. She strikes up a conversation with a nice restaurant owner, only to realize that this guy isn't everything he seems. They actually leave it kind of vague. Either this guy works for Beyond and is planning to try and get revenge on Janine for what she and Ben did to the company, or maybe he's a cop? Because technically Janine still should be in jail for killing her abusive father, and the only reason she got out in the first place was because Beyond pulled some string so that Ben didn't have to live alone. Fearing that she may never actually be free now, she decides to actively go back to Ben. A couple minutes ago, she thought the man she loved was going down a dark road that she couldn't follow, but now that this more directly affects her, she's decided to say, you know what, screw the world, let's burn it down and be supervillains together. I just seriously, we're only like 5 pages into this thing and already the leaps in logic and characterization are making my friggin' head spin, and it only gets worse. From there, we see that Ben has actually been stalking Peter hanging outside of his building. It's during one of these stalking sessions, Ben ends up coming face to face with Gus, that debt collector who's had it out for Peter since this Zeb Wells series began. Gus, who up until now has been shown to actually be kind of a complex and interesting character who I was interested to know more about, ends up completely destroying his mystique in just a few seconds, when he stupidly jumps to the conclusion that Ben must be Peter and that he's finally cornered his prey, except for the fact that Ben totally has a different hair color than Peter. Yes, they're clones and they're supposed to look alike, but Gus doesn't even mention the idea that maybe Peter dyed his hair to try and elude him. Gus also just lets Ben walk away despite the fact that he was 100% certain that he had finally tracked down Peter Parker and that he might be able to get back some of the money that he owes. But more on this later. Now that Ben and Janine have both decided they're going to be supervillains, they decide they need to make a trip. Where? Well, to Limbo, of course. Yeah, don't ask for a second how exactly these two managed to thread the needle of both magic and science to figure out how to get into Limbo. They just can, okay? It's there that Ben as Chasm hopes to recruit a brand new ally in his new war against Peter Parker. That, of course, would be Madeline Pryor, the Goblin Queen, aka the famous clone of Jean Grey. Madeline Pryor had been resurrected by Krakoa and the Quiet Council as a gift to Havoc for all the good work he had done on the Hellions, but they knew she was too powerful and too dangerous, so they basically sent her off to Limbo to rule in finger quotes. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, how the hell does Ben Reilly know there's an evil clone of Jean Grey out there? Well, they actually did answer that. It was just in a free comic book day issue. Essentially, they crossed paths. And essentially, it really is as easy as Ben thinking, oh, you're an evil clone, I'm an evil clone, now we have so much in common, we should totally be friends and hang out and team up and stuff. And indeed they do. In fact, Janine and him end up moving into Limbo and living with Madeline Pryor in her creepy Goblin Queen castle. It's there they start hatching their plan to invade New York and get revenge on their most hated enemies, basically the very people they are cloned from. Madeline admits that she can't really go out in the field and help them because to do so would end up catching the eye of Krakoa and they'd pretty much come down on her like a ton of bricks. But Chasm can totally act as her agent, and the Goblin Queen can totally handle the back end with all of her mutant magic stuff. It's also here too, the story starts to imply something of a love triangle between Ben and these two beautiful redheaded women in his life, because I mean, geez, it wouldn't be a Goblin Queen story without a love triangle, right? Madeline tells Janine not only not to worry, but that she can make her wildest dream come true. She can get her off the sidelines and into the actual game so she can fight alongside Ben. Madeline decides to empower Janine by using the Finger of Sim. Don't remember him? Well, he was an 80s X-Men character. He actually ruled Limbo himself. The Goblin Queen goes on a whole little tirade saying that Janine has always had to run and hide, change her name and face to stay one step ahead of her enemies. But that now, with this brand new demonic upgrade, Janine will finally be able to harness the power of all the different masks she's worn in her life as the brand new supervillainess Hallows Eve. Oh my god, does this feel like a creative stretch. You had the name and the costume all ready to go and just worked backwards to try and make Janine fill it, right? But hey, don't worry, if you've decided that you love Hallows Eve based solely on the look alone, she's gonna have a bunch of tie-ins to this brand new dark web event. Now, what exactly is the evil clone's plan to get back at Jean and Peter? Well, for that, we actually rejoin Gus. You see, Ben's creeping outside Peter's apartment again when Gus starts getting all in his face. He says that despite what Peter Parker's friends and family have told him over the last little bit, that he's a good guy who just fell on hard times, Gus knows different. He sees the real man inside Peter Parker, and he's a fake Peter Parker. Which, wouldn't you know, it turns out to be Ben Reilly's equivalent of calling Marty McFly chicken because it causes him to freak the hell out, beat Gus up, and then eventually drag him back to Limbo. Well, geez, I guess that's the end of the debt collector saga, huh, that they've been running with since the first arc. This is really anticlimactic. I actually thought they were going to turn him into a brand new supervillain, but no. Instead, they force Gus to eat of the Limbo fruit, which in doing so allows Madeline Pryor to basically eat his soul, and by extension, gain all of his memories. The idea being that if Chasm can do this to Spider-Man, then not only will he be able to kill his most hated foe, but he'll finally be able to reclaim his beloved core memories. And I guess we'll also get Jean Grey the same way, even though Madeline Pryor probably doesn't want her memories, but yeah, that's where the comic ends. And so that was Amazing Spider-Man issue number 14, everybody. The big kickoff to Dark Web, the big new Spider-Man event that's going to be running for the next couple months, and oh boy, is this off to a rough start. I know it's been a while, so people probably forget the Ben Reilly era finale from not that long ago. I thought it was super contrived how they had to make up a reason for Ben to be so unreasonable and fight Peter, and become a bad guy for basically no reason, and sadly everything that was wrong with that ending more or less continues here into Dark Web. That ending makes Peter look dumb too, because if it really was just a simple matter of giving Ben back their shared core memories, aren't there like a whole bunch of super scientists and psychics and magicians who could make that happen easily enough? Oh, I guess if they did, we couldn't have a story. Honestly, at this point, I'm not surprised. I'm used to Ben Reilly getting drugged through the mud for good or for ill, but honestly, it's Janine who I feel the worst for. She was actually a really good and interesting character during the Beyond era, with a lot of depth and complexity and nuance, but right here they just totally flip the switch and say, well, you're a bad guy now, I guess. Ben's motivation is flawed. Her motivation is weak. It's literally just, I gotta stand by my man. Even Goblin Queen comes out of this setup not looking good. I understand that she probably always wants to pick a fight with Jean Grey always, but the idea that she's just like, yeah, sure, strangers, let's team up for a big event story. I have literally nothing else going on right now. Hey, remember Inferno back in 1988? That was a pretty big story. I'm sure this will be equally as big an event for me, right? Huh? Right? Yeah, if you couldn't already tell, not a huge fan of this issue. I would give it a 5 out of 10. That's mostly me being generous and me hoping that Zeb Wells and company can fix this one as it goes. Furthermore, the timing on this one couldn't suck anymore. We had 2 issues of Amazing Spider-Man that were all about setting up Norman Osborn for his Gold Goblin series, and here we have an issue 14 that doesn't even feature Peter in it at all.
Hey there everyone, Kate Joel again, and I just want to thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. It means a lot to me. And hey, if you enjoyed the book I covered in this issue and want some comics of your own, might I recommend Book Depository? It's my #1 place for shopping for comic book trades. You get a great price, and if you use my link down in the description, you'll actually be helping me out at the same time. You get something, I get something, everybody wins, right? So until next time everyone, I've been Joel, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.